your compliance. You will feel no pain anymore, no more defiance. Just give us your compliance.
Hey, it is Larry Sharp here, and welcome to the Sharp Way Show. So happy to have you here this evening. It is a little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And yes, you got to look at my mug. That's kind of how it works. I appreciate you guys giving me a couple moments of your evening. And today is going to be a very good show. I know it. And so do you, or you wouldn't have tuned in. So do the right thing. Do the like, comment, and share thing. I ask you all the time. I bug you. Why? Because I'm bored? No, not because I'm bored. Because I got to get past all the algorithms. And the more you like, the more you comment, the more you share, the more chance I get past those algorithms and they stop shadow banning me. So please do that to the best of your ability. It really does matter. I am very lucky today. Super lucky today. I have someone with me who I respect tremendously, who has spoken at many different places, who is fighting the good fight to fight against the government, like so many of us are, to help out individual people. And she's doing it on the front lines and helping you. So training some soldiers on top of it, which is great. I love that tremendously. And I hope I get her last name right. I don't mean her first name right. I hope I get her last name right. She is the executive director of the Fully Informed Jury Association, Kirsten, now do I get it right? Tynan?
Yes.
Yes. Look at me go.
2 thumbs up, one for each
Look
name.
At that. I am winning. Awesome. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that as well. And
the people who are interested in talking to Kirsten more, please head over to FIJA.org, FIJA.org if you're listening to this, or follow them on Twitter, FIJA National on Twitter. So I want to bring up a couple of things here. And one of the most important things is most people do not want to be on juries at all. They think, well, what's the old saying? Juries, a bunch of people who are too stupid, right? Who couldn't figure out how to scam out or whatever. That's what most people think. Now, I don't believe that. To be forward, I've been on more than one jury. I volunteer for jury duty. And I've been on one criminal all the way till the end, and one civil that they settled before we were done. So I've been on 2 juries. I've gone to more than once, but I think it's important. This is a piece you bring up often. Tell me about this.
So it always drives me nuts that we portray people who actually get on juries as like the stupidest among us, because to me, they're heroes. And if let's take a different kind of hero, firefighters. Do we sit around saying how stupid they are to go into a burning building?
No, we love firefighters.
Exactly. We love them. They're on calendars and everything.
Yes, we buy calendars with them. Right. We love them. You're right. Yes.
Because they save our butts. And jurors do that too in many situations. Even if I am never prosecuted for something, and I hope I'm not, even if people who are listening are never prosecuted for something, part of the reason they're not being prosecuted for made up crap is because jurors are kind of the threat against government that prevents the government from just falsely accusing you of stuff and then deciding that you're guilty on its own. They have to get through a jury.
Say that again. Juries are the what? Say it again.
They're what's standing between the government and you.
Look at that.
Not as much with plea bargains, but we'll get into the details of that.
Right. Sure.
But there is always still that theoretical threat that if they can't make the case to a jury, they can't punish you. And the less that threat exists because of plea bargains, because of lack of speedy trials, because of things like asset forfeiture that allows them to take your property without accusing you of a crime. As long as those sorts of things are chipping away at it, our protection is reduced. So I hope that anyone who does get called for jury duty would look at it as an opportunity rather than a duty.
That's how I see it.
Yes.
Like, that is how I see it.
And a lot of people who aren't into it at all, the minute I tell them about jury nullification, they're like, oh, hey, now.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
So
I got to tell you, my wife thought the same thing. She thought that she's like, jury's dumb. And I explained, look, this is what a jury does. Cause she knows I've been on jury and she's always trying to get out. I'm like, she's like, why do you always like go to the jury duty? Like, why don't you just throw the thing away or don't show up or they'll stop sending it to you? Why do you keep doing it? And I really explained it to her. And what got her, you might like the story, the murder case I was on.
Oh,
I could see in the jury the line between those who had compassion and those who didn't. And it wasn't based on race. And people think it was. It was based on class.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Come from poorer neighborhoods where they were Hispanic, white, or black, were like, maybe. Everyone who came from wealthier or middle class above was like, put them away, lock them up. It was based on. When I told my wife that, she was like, what? Wait a minute. I thought juries were about the evidence. I'm like, yeah, that's true, but.
Yeah. I've read studies that talk about how the difference between class, even though you sincerely believe things, you tend to view them differently. And a great example in one of the papers I read was that if part of the evidence is that while the person who was accused was allegedly committing the crime, if they are said to be carrying a knife, white collar jurors tend to think they were carrying it to do something wrong.
Yes.
Blue collar jurors may think they wanted it for defense or that they used it in their job. Yes. And you can see how someone who like sits at a computer all day isn't thinking, oh, they might be opening boxes,
Right, exactly.
It's not because they're a horrible
cutting
person.
Wire.
Right.
Yes. Who knows?
It's not that they're a horrible person. They just don't have that experience. So I don't think we have to jump as much to you're an evil, horrible person as people sometimes do. But and I feel this is the part that's bothering because as some people know, I've done consulting with defense attorneys, helping to pick juries, helping to do a voir dire, right? Helping to do those types of things. I've done that in the past. And what I didn't understand before I was doing that kind of work was I always thought that it was kind of a one-on-one, right? It's the prosecutor against the accused and it's one-on-one, but it's not. If those of you don't know, it's not. It's about 4-1. The judge assumes you're guilty. That's a guarantee. The judge, it was a former prosecutor. He or she assumes you're guilty. Yeah. And I want to break in here and point out that Clark Neely from the Cato Institute actually reviewed, I think it was federal judges, and they are drastically drawn from the ranks of prosecutors.
Yes.
They're almost all prosecutors. Yeah.
Yes.
This is not hyperbole. There's data.
Yes. 100%. So the odds are the judge already thinks you're guilty. For sure, the prosecutor does, because the prosecutor's job is to destroy people's lives. That's their job. So if they think you're a good person, they're inhuman. So they have to believe you're guilty and bad. Otherwise, how could they sleep at night, right? That's their job. Yeah. So the prosecutor assumes you're guilty. But the media assumes you're guilty. So the media says you're guilty also. But worse, so is the jury.
Yeah.
The jury assumes you're guilty, right? So one of the things I would do in my prep for voir dire is I would literally have my defense attorney actually say that. Say, this is my pitch. You might enjoy this.
Oh yeah.
This is my pitch. My pitch is you say, look, we all know. And I never have them say my client. I have them say the person's name. Attorneys always say my client. And I say, don't do that. Say the person's name, right? So say, Brian, we all know that right now, Brian's innocent. And I say that. And you'll watch them. But legally, I'm right. So they can't, a judge can't go, that's not true. He's got to keep his mouth shut. We don't know that legally he's innocent. We don't know he's innocent right now. My concern is, my worry is that you as a juror, that if you see him sitting here, in your heart, you might say he's guilty already. That's my worry. You watch the juror's face. That's one of the things I would train defense attorneys, right? Do that. Yeah. Look at their face and then see which one goes, yeah, right? And which one goes, no, right? You look at the face, you got to pick your juries. So anyway, that was an interesting story you might enjoy, but yes.
Oh yeah. It's sad to me because part of the reason that jurors are, so heavily weighted that way is because prosecutors will stack on extra charges, just make it look like there's a big old pile.
Yes.
And they're like, well, he must be guilty of something or else they wouldn't have charged them with so much. No, it's that they're charging with them with so much because they want them to break and take a plea bargain so that you, the juror, never hear it, and that if you
Yes.
do, you've in your mind, you've been psychologically primed to think, well, boy, it all sounds bad. The thing is,
Yes.
I could accuse Larry of any horrible thing. It
And I
doesn't
probably
change
did
the
it.
fact that he didn't do.
But I probably
I
did
was
it. It's the
about to
problem.
defend you. Stop, you're
Oh, yeah,
ruining
yeah.
it.
I'm really sorry. Yes. But go ahead. Yes.
Like anyone can literally accuse anyone else of anything. There is
Right.
no, in accusing someone else of something, there's very little value in that as far as proving anything, because words come out of everyone's mouth pretty
Yes.
much just the same. I mean,
Well, I will go
Or
one step
hand-
further. If you get a public defender who either has been doing it so long or doesn't care anymore, they're against you too.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because they just want a plea bargain and that's it. They want to plea bargain it
Yeah.
out. So even if you get a bad public defender,
Mhm.
right? I'm not slandering public
Yeah.
defenders,
Yeah.
but there are bad ones, right?
Yes,
that
there
exist.
are. Yeah, there
So if
are.
you get a bad public defender,
Mhm.
they're against you too.
Yeah. And I will put in a little word of compassion for the public defenders, because if you ever look up what the prosecutor's budget is versus the public defenders, and
Oh my
what
God.
prosecutors' salaries are versus public defenders, there you go. And what their
Yes.
caseloads are. We
Yes.
have literally seen during the pandemic, especially, but I think even this started a little bit before, that public defenders' offices are suing because they're saying we have like hundreds and hundreds, in some cases, thousands of cases per person. We
Yep.
cannot defend people adequately. We cannot provide a competent defense in this way. And
Yes.
then they're the ones who get in trouble. So I'm like, I do have a little bit of sympathy for them.
I do too. Don't get me wrong.
But the
Like, that's
fact
why.
is,
Yes.
the fact is that if you're using a public defender, you're at serious risk of not
But
getting.
here's the worst part is I've had people come into the firm I'm working with, right? And say, I don't think I need a lawyer. And we'd say, why? And I'm not joking, because I'm innocent. I know you're laughing. I know, but people believe that. But you brought up something that I got to say here that is going to make my libertarians love you. They're going to want to jump to the screen and give you a hug and a kiss after this. You said the government has an incentive to convict and incarcerate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people don't want to believe that. Libertarians, we know that already. But the average American doesn't want to believe that. They want to believe that the goal of government is truth.
Yeah.
It's not, but they want to believe that.
In high school, I sat there on election night with my blank map and my red pencil and blue pencil, staying up late, filling it in, because that wasn't all figured out ahead of time. And I watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and boy,
absolutely.
I mean, that really got me.
Right?
I get it. The problem is that if you are a libertarian in particular, and you start thinking about it economically,
right,
what's going on there? People are making careers out of this. People are
100%.
making reputations out of this. They get social status. They get benefits.
Hold on. In New York State, AG doesn't stand for Attorney General. It stands for aspiring governor.
Yeah, exactly.
So they make
it's a
career out of
path. Yeah. And one of the things I've been conflicted on over the years is, electing judges, electing prosecutors. And then some places people are like, oh, we should elect a public defender. But think about the economic incentives there. When people want people convicted, do you want the person in charge of defending everyone elected by the people who love prosecution? That seems like a bad idea.
Terrible idea.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yes.
Exactly. And we've seen cases. One of the things that unfortunately just got turned down by the Supreme Court recently, I think it was recently, was an issue. Someone is in it. There used to be 3 states in which, even though a jury voted in a capital case for a life sentence, the judge could say, well, that's just a recommendation. I don't like that. I'm going to flip it and make it a death penalty. Just me, myself, the judge. And that is no longer a
terrible idea.
It is because what happened in election years in Alabama, 9 times out of 10, they would flip a life sentence to a death sentence. And although it's no longer happening going forward, there are still many people in Alabama who have death sentences against their jury's wish, and the Supreme Court won't review it.
Yes. Yeah, it's terrible. But that goes right to your point. It is in the government's interest to incarcerate and to convict. It's it's
Yeah.
kind of in their entire piece, right?
Yeah.
But the thing I want to bring up again and make kind of clear is we're supposed to be innocent. And what I hear people say all the time is until proven guilty.
Yeah.
But that's not true. It's we're
Mhm.
innocent unless proven guilty. And that's a big
Yeah.
difference because I had a prosecutor tell me, say out loud, no.
Mhm.
You're innocent until proven broke.
Yeah. That's not that wrong either. That's
That's the sad
disturbing.
part. He's right.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Exactly.
And he's
Yeah,
right.
there are a lot of things in the legal system that are just these very subtle things, but they psychologically prime you. One
Mhm.
of the things that Catherine Bernard, who's a defense attorney in Georgia, who has actually won at least 2 cases by jury nullification, having her client get on the stand and say, yes, I did it. And at least one of them, I think, said I'd do it again. And the jury still said not guilty. But she points out that, like, if you look at the architecture of courthouses and where different people enter,
Yes.
you will find them increasingly set up so that the prosecutor goes in somewhere near the jurors. They get a lot of face time, even if they're not chitty chatting. They can say hello in the elevator, but the defense attorney can't do that. The person who's accused is probably coming in through the basement and up the elevator, so they can never
with
even
handcuffs on.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Well,
yes.
Theoretically, the jury should never see the handcuffs. I'm not saying
Yes.
it doesn't happen, but there
Yes.
is at least that. But it's
Yeah.
basically set up so that the government builds a rapport with the jurors. That's part of why the judge is always like, oh, everyone stand for the jurors. Let's make them feel like they're the most important people in the room. And they are, but not for the reason the judge is basically kissing ass to make them feel like, oh, I'm buddies with the judge.
Well,
and that the judge is neutral.
There's the piece I want to give. New York's system is a disaster. However, there is one thing I'm going to give New York total credit for, and that is they do keep both attorneys completely away from juries.
Yeah.
So that's one thing New York does well. Like, you
Right.
can't be in the same elevator, you can't be in the same hallway. There is no chance at all. And again, I've been on more than one jury. There is and I've been on the defense team. No chance. The only time we were ever able to see the jury is after a verdict. I will always try to interview the jury.
Please. Thank you.
I always try to. I can't always, and they're not required to talk to me.
No,
right? So just walk right by. But I've always tried. Yes, because I've watched juries put innocent people. The reason why I don't do this anymore is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It really is. I've seen juries put innocent people away and ruin their lives. And I'm like, how could you? How? Like, I know the person's innocent. Like, I know they're innocent. They didn't do it. And
we actually get a lot of people who are like, it's like they're kind of wanting absolution from us to say, oh, it wasn't your fault. And I'm a little bit mean. I won't do that because it kind of is your responsibility, because guess what? You did it.
Yes.
Yeah, you might have been misled, but a lot of people are like, okay, well, I didn't know these things that I found out afterward. And typically it's about what the penalty at stake was. Very frequently, and I want to say during Occupy Wall Street there in New York, there was a woman who was I think she said the cop shoved her and he said she had shoved him, but like nobody was injured. It was quote unquote an assault charge, I think, but I don't even think the guy had a Band-Aid. So normal people would be like, what a dick, and walk away. I think, at least that's what I think normal people would do. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, it went to court. She got convicted and her jurors were horrified because they were like, oh, we thought she was going to get like 20 hours of community service, and she actually had to go to jail over it. And so
in New York State, the judges are terrible. And I mean, they're embarrassingly, and if you're a judge in New York State, you should be embarrassed because your ilk is, maybe you're a good judge, maybe you're the one, but they're terrible. Judges literally say, this is my personal experience, and I've watched it. They say, you may not take into account the punishment when you're talking about guilt or innocent. They actually say that. They also say, they say jury nullification is wrong. You may not do it. That they actually say, if you think this is not a crime, you must still convict. New York State still says that.
They probably don't say must, but if they do, I want to know about that immediately, because that is very, very illegal, and that probably would win on appeal. I have at least seen it win on appeal in Kansas, but it is absolutely forbidden for a verdict of guilty to be directed. The judge can say that the jury has to return a not guilty verdict, but the judge cannot say you must or you will or you shall return a guilty verdict or convict. That's why you will typically see in jury instructions a very subtle difference where they say, if this has not been proven beyond reasonable doubt, you must acquit.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
if it has been proven beyond reasonable doubt, you should convict. And that is your clue that every other thing they're telling you against jury nullification is absolute garbage.
Yep.
They have free reign to do that because appellate courts have essentially ruled over and over that, yes, while that is a lie, it is a harmless error. And so it's basically given judges carte blanche to lie to
Right.
people. But
Yep.
let me just tell you about a case in New York from 2019.
Okay.
The case was People versus Mendoza, decided on June 13th, 2019. And what happened was the person was accused of something they were caught on video doing. So not a lot of room for a defense. The defense attorney kind of angled for a jury nullification defense. And because he or she did that, I don't recall if it was a man or woman, but because the attorney did that and the accused was then convicted, the accused appealed saying, oh, ineffective assistance of counsel, because they were using a jury nullification defense. Well, the court ruled that the jury nullification strategy did not constitute ineffective assistance of counsel. And if it was true that you couldn't do that it was wrong to nullify, then why wasn't this ineffective assistance of counsel? They're trying to have it both ways. Please do not pay.
Oh, I like that.
Don't pay attention to these lies you're being told. I tell people all the time, this is why the Fully Informed Jury Association exists, because the minute you step into the courthouse, you're going to either be kept in the dark or outright lied to about it. And
so let me bring this up. If you guys want to follow FIJA, right, please do so at FIJA, FIJA, if you are just listening and not watching, FIJA.org, or follow them on Twitter at FIJA National. Either one of those, please follow them.
And I should mention, I should have said this before, but I just thought of it. If you have jury duty coming up, I have a quick link for you. FIJA.org/jury duty will get you our guide to jury duty, including links to exercises I've put together to help you dress, adjust your attitude, have, what reading materials, types of things to have with you. And then how to, even before you go, if you get a questionnaire, which is much more common lately, how do you deal with some of the questions on there? And when you're during jury selection, how do you answer stuff, especially if you're asked about your opinion of the law, or if you're asked about jury nullification or things like that. They're asking those questions to weed you out.
Yes. Hold on. I want to walk down that road because I've done some of that myself. So I'm guilty of some of that myself. So I do want to bring that up, but let me grab a couple of comments. People are commenting. I want to grab a couple of comments if I could. So Charles is breaking my, he's saying Larry's late. I was late like a minute, Charles. I was like 2 minutes late. I was
talking. That one. It was on me. There we
go. That's true. I was like, we got to hurry up. Talk. So people chatting.
That was on me. So, my bad.
Yeah. So he's getting mad at me. I'm sorry. So Dave says, I just finished pizza, even though I'm supposed to be fasting. Dave, fast. What are you doing? What are you doing? If you got to fast. Be good. Come on now. So I guess Caroline knows you. She says, yay.
Oh, yay. Yeah. Carolyn. Yeah.
There we go. She says, yay, Kirsten. So there we go. Love that. So, Shelley asked later on for us to please speak up the power of a seated grand jury. Very good. Yes,
Boy,
Shelley, thank you.
Stories there.
So let's exactly. Missouri Battle Flag says shared it must be beyond a reasonable doubt. There we go. Absolutely. So Deborah says everyone has an opinion but no expertise on the criminal justice system. Interview probation officers who are at the center of the system and know about evidence-based practices. First mistake, the system deals with offender, not offense, to determine amenability to local services. Violent offenders also commit non-violent offenses. Well, I want to first, before we go down that road, Deborah, I want to say Deborah's correct in a very important way, meaning that usually when we talk about things like back the blue or something like that, we think of law enforcement only as cops. And it's not true. Law enforcement is cops, but it's also corrections officers, parole officers. It is all of them. And the entire system needs reform. So I want to be clear on that piece. But go ahead. Do you want to touch her specific issue?
I don't particularly disagree with any of that. But that is all for me kind of like that's after the jury's work. So that's also not really my area of expertise. So
yes.
I would be a little averse to dabbling in it when that's not really my area of expertise.
Yeah, what I would say is Deborah has a very valid point that most people don't think about the parole system at all. And to be forward, there's obviously stress on parolees, clearly, but there's also stress on parole officers. There's stress on both. And I always say you've got to get both of them to be better, right? Because the problem is if you're bad towards your corrections officer, parole officers, they stop caring. Because they're being treated poorly. They're getting no respect, treated poorly. They stop caring. If they stop caring, how are they going to treat the inmates? How are they going to treat the parolees? Everybody suffers. So we want to have a system to where they're all helped. So I think she's got a very an important part, 100%.
I will add to that just on a general note for all of life. I think when we look at people who we think are doing bad things, our reaction is naturally to like hurt them more. We want to like pay them back. But I think kind of the way out of that is really actually unintuitively the opposite, that those are the people who need our care most.
As Gandhi says, an eye for an eye and we all go blind. Yes, I'd rather us not all go blind. I'm with you on that completely. So Merlin says they don't seem to pick a fair jury. So that's the perfect time. Let's pop into that if we could, right? Now, I've been guilty of this because you talk about the idea of being neutral. How did I get on a jury with my clear thoughts about juries?
Yeah.
Because I actually didn't answer the question. When
That's great strategy. I want everyone to make a note because what is important when you're asked a question is that words come out of your mouth.
Correct. Yes.
They think you're saying something. It doesn't have to be exactly the answer that in the way that they are expecting.
Yes. So when literally they asked me the question, like, what about whatever, I don't remember even what the question was, but all I said was, look, I was a Marine. I understand instructions. If the judge says A plus B equals C, then A plus B equals C. I get it. Yeah. That's how I answered the question. They were like, thank you, done, moved on.
Exactly. You didn't say, I will do this or I won't do this. Most libertarians, God bless us, everyone.
Yes.
We want people to know our opinions. And
yes,
I got to tell you how I did the worst. This is like one of the worst libertarian sins of all time. Before I was involved in FIJA, when it was a little bit after I was out of college, knew about FIJA from being in college and being a libertarian. Then I was out in the real world, got called for jury duty. How exciting. I know about jury nullification. Oh God, it's a drug case. It's a drug case. This is gonna be great.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I'm the perfect juror. They're gonna put me on this jury, and I'm gonna be like 12 angry men. It's gonna be amazing.
I'm gonna convince them all with my libertarian ideals, and I'm gonna have all 12 people go, "You're right, we're all libertarians." Of course.
I get to the point where they're asking questions. I'm getting to answer, and they want to know, does anyone think drugs should be legalized? Oh, and by the way, I should say that the charges were possession of drugs and possession of a Ziploc bag. How is that a crime, you ask? Because the drugs were in the bag, and because they touched the bag, it became drug paraphernalia.
Paraphernalia, yep.
So they were going to actually put someone in prison extra for a Ziploc bag.
Correct.
I don't even know how people can live with themselves, but okay. So they ask, okay, who believes in legalizing drugs? I was in Catholic school. I like raising my hand.
Yeah.
I got it right up there. I'm sure I had a big old grin on my face.
You won.
And they ask which ones, and I just say all of them.
Of
and
course,
there's like a kind of a gasp in the room. And then they did what is known as trying to rehabilitate a juror. Someone asked, could you set your opinions aside and could you still be a fair and impartial juror? And I'm thinking, I'm probably the only one here who could be fair. Yes, I can. But of course I got axed. Not for
Yes,
cause though.
absolutely.
They had to use a peremptory challenge. But guess what? What did I do to that person? I don't even know. That person might have gone to prison because I was so proud of my opinions and wanting everyone to know them, because that's kind of how libertarians tend to be in a lot of cases.
Yep.
And I was not an exception. And if I had that to do over now, what would I say? And that's part of one of the things you'll find in the jury duty guide on our website is how to answer a question like that. And so if someone's asking me, do I believe in legalizing drugs? That might be harder to answer directly. But if they're asking an open-ended question, which is becoming more common, which is like, what are your thoughts on drug laws? Or how would you deal with the national drug problem, or things like that?
Mm-hmm.
I might be able to say something like, well, it's not something that affects my daily life. I mean, it isn't.
I got you.
Just personally for me.
Absolutely.
There's just a lot of ways you can say things. Oh, there are a lot of sides to that issue.
There we go.
Yes. That is true.
Well,
there are quite a lot.
The funny thing is, when I work for defense. I will not work for the government. So I work for the defense. So what we would do is we'd have somebody, usually either a legal secretary or someone would be there, literally going through because you get a list. Those of you who don't know, you get a list of all the jurors. You get a list of them, right? The people who you want to pick during jury selection. And literally, we'd be on social media, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, checking, and we're looking for, it's going to sound horrible for somebody, we're looking for the back to blue stuff. Any back to blue stuff, we do not want you on that jury.
Yeah.
Right? We're defense. We don't want you supporting law enforcement in that jury, because very often, as you know, cops are very often witnesses. And if you love back to blue, you're going to believe everything the cop says. So we're like, we don't want you to believe us. So we want to so we're looking at that and trying to pull people off. So while the questions are being asked, we're looking back going, no, not that one. No, not that one. Ask this question. So but this goes to your other police, right? In America, if you can afford to write a check for 6 figures, you can get a fair trial and fair sentencing. If you can write a check for 6 figures. If you're guilty, you get fair sentencing, because sentencing is a whole other piece, right? So you can get it. If you can write a check for 7 figures or more, you can get off, even if you did it.
Yeah, you don't even know to go.
That's correct.
You're going to get a plea deal so sweet that you don't even have to show up.
Yes. Now, if you can't write either of those checks, sadly, you're guilty. It doesn't really matter if you did it or not. You're guilty. And that's how bad our system is right now. So the people I've worked for are usually people who can write big checks. That's how we're able to have the resources to give someone that type of thing. In fact, we are, the law firm I was working at this point was one called Varghese and Associates. And we're the only people who actually beat literally the IRS. And the IRS has a 99.75% conviction rate. We are the 0.25. Yes. Yes. So there we go. Yes.
I will add for folks who are on the defense side, who Larry's side wouldn't be weeding off, but the prosecution would. You will often get asked a question along the lines of, would you be more or less likely to believe the testimony of a police officer because of their job as compared to other witnesses? And the way it's worded, it leads you to want to answer yes or no. You don't have to.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
If you answer either way, yes or no, one side's going to probably want to get rid of you.
Correct. Yes.
Even if the defense doesn't realize that you would be great for them, they'd be like, ooh, So you don't want to put that out there. So you could ask, one thing I would ask is, can you truthfully say, I would have to see the testimony of each witness to assess its credibility and to know how much weight I would assign it.
Yeah.
That is true for me. I bet it's true for a lot of people, even if you have strong feelings pro or anti-cop.
Absolutely.
You probably, in all sincerity, would assess each one individually, or could.
Yes. So
could is a great
Robert
word.
Says, Rob, what I would ask, the way I wanted to ask the question was always this: should I be worried? Is that a concern? That's how because I'm not trying to say, do you? Because then I'm like, is that a concern?
Yeah, It feels a little accusatory. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great point.
So Robert says, I basically didn't answer questions correctly to get on juries I was on. There we go.
Next time you get called, go to FIJA.org/jury duty and let's see if we can help improve your odds a little bit.
There we go. The Missouri Battle Flag says, thank you for your emails. You guys do great work. It's better that the guilty go free than the innocent man goes to prison. Look at that. There we go. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love that. Very good. All right. Let's see here. I will. Rafi wants to talk about both bail reform and prison reform. We will talk about that, Rafi. We will, but we want to walk down this road a bit longer first to make sure. So, Jean, by the way, has my back. She said, I'm glad you were late because I was also. Thank you, Jean. Charlie busted my stones. Thank you. I appreciate that. AH says, FIJA empowers jurors. Look at that.
Oh, good. Good.
I love that.
That's
I love
my
that.
hope.
So Floyd says, this is why they now employ alternate jurors to replace any juror from following the historic jury duties.
That is
We'll talk about that.
Point.
So please cover that.
So one thing that it's important for you to know, because you probably, most people probably think, oh, once I get into deliberations, I can talk about jury nullification and I'm going to be juror number 8 from 12 Angry Men who convinces everyone else. But
absolutely,
you while you cannot be punished for that, you can be removed from the jury for that, even as late as deliberations. And how would that happen? One of your fellow jurors can squeal on you by writing a note to the judge, and then you will get removed. You won't be punished. You'll get removed. But then who's left standing up for that person that you believe should not be punished? So I would be, in most circumstances, it's a little bit of an art, so I won't say it across the board, but I would err heavily on the side of not discussing jury nullification. You do have to participate in deliberations. You can't just say, not guilty, I won't hear anything else.
Right.
You can participate by actively listening, asking questions from your fellow jurors. If you have even the flimsiest bit of reason to say there's doubt, bring it up, mention it, because that will help protect you if someone does try to get you kicked off the jury. They are not allowed to remove you for thinking the person is factually not guilty, or thinking that not thinking that the person is factually guilty, I should say, because you don't have to be sure they're not guilty. You just have to not be convinced beyond reasonable doubt that they are guilty. So expressing doubt about their guilt is great. And
that's fine, right? Yep.
Yeah. And if you can't think of anything else to say, you can just go a little bit general and say, in my heart, I just can't convict this person. You don't have to get into detailed reasons.
Jonathan says, I brought up jury nullification during selection and was dismissed lightning fast. Yep. Yes. Jonathan's one of ours, though, so he wanted to say it. I get it. Jonathan, I feel you, brother. I want to also. I feel you. But please, listen to Kirsten. She's right. Just listen to her.
I've actually had state contacts for our organization who volunteered it without being asked about it. And I'm like,
yes.
Please don't do that.
Yes. Yes.
You can make such a much bigger difference by being on the jury. And even here's the thing. When you go to vote, the only way you quote unquote win is if you and hundreds to thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of other people, depending on which election, you're on their side. But in the jury, you can just bring things to a halt by yourself. That's where libertarians have to look and see, we have a niche there. We don't have to, I love us. I really do, but we're annoying people. We have a hard time with social skills.
Sometimes true. Yes.
We tend to come across as combative, even though we have great hearts.
Well, because we're right.
Exactly. We think we're right about so much. Yes. Exactly. But that makes it tough for us to convince a lot of people to come over to our side sometimes. But you don't need anyone to vote with you. All you have to say is not guilty, and you at least get a hung jury. Now, let's
walk down that road, right?
Yes,
I want to walk down that road. People get confused between a mistrial and the acquittal, right? I think most people have no idea which is which or what the value is of either one of them. Please walk down that road for me.
And I'm going to put some of this responsibility on judges, because more and more I've been seeing where judges will strongly suggest to jurors that they can't leave until they've come to a guilty or not guilty verdict. And that is a lie. So if you believe, if the entire jury believes beyond reasonable doubt that the person is guilty and votes guilty, then they're convicted. If the entire jury believes beyond reasonable doubt or votes not guilty for whatever reason, even if it's not reasonable doubt, even if it's jury nullification, if the entire jury votes not guilty, that's an acquittal. But what if you disagree? What if you can't come to a conclusion that everyone's going to settle on? Then you have what's called a hung jury, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to send a note out to the judge that says we can't agree, and there's a hung jury. And most likely you'll be told at least once, maybe more than once, to keep deliberating.
Yes.
And then
I've watched that happen more than once.
And then there's a charge that is given. In some states, it's called different things based on the court cases that decided it, but you'll usually hear it referred to as the Allen charge, where the judge basically gives you a little bit of light bullying to go back and try and agree. And that charge may even say that it's better for everyone if you all agree, and it will probably tell you that no other jury is going to do a better job. So it's going to strongly imply.
Oh, that's not, I've seen that. That's called what again? Tell me what that's called.
The Allen charge.
Allen charge.
Yeah, it's after a case in which one of the parties was named Allen. But yeah, some states have a similar instruction, but it's named after a state level case instead.
Got it. Okay.
But it's not better for the defendant for you to agree that it's guilty. That's just not the case. That's outright lying to you. And then they're going to suggest that maybe you're wasting taxpayer dollars if you don't come to a conclusion. They're going to suggest all kinds of things that they might leave the question open of maybe you'll be here forever. You won't actually know.
That I've actually heard. Yes. Wow, that's crazy. So I'm not the crazy one. That's actually happens all over. Okay.
This is actually happening. But I beg you to please stick to your conscientiously held vote, because if there is a hung jury, number one, that person does not get convicted that day. Number two, that day. They can be retried, but they might not be retried. And we've seen that in a lot of cases where afterward the jury is polled, and if there's like, oh, it was like 7 to 5 or 9-3, then there's enough people that makes it sound to the prosecutor like it's not worth retrying. And in a couple of cases in San Diego, these were medical marijuana cases. We actually saw the judge dismiss due to in the interest of justice. He dismissed with prejudice in the interest of justice, meaning with prejudice means they can't retry you even though it was a hung jury. That's rare, but it's a possibility. What if you do? What if they do want to retry you? They might decide they want to offer you a better plea bargain, and you could take that. Maybe you at least improved your situation if you took a plea bargain, or if you go to trial again, now you've seen their playbook at least. Maybe you have a better shot then. But it is never better for the defendant to be convicted, because once you are convicted, I think a lot of people don't understand how it works. If you get an appeal, it's not a wipe the slate clean, we start from zero. When you appeal, you are appealing from a presumption of guilt. You do not get your presumption of innocence back in most cases. Right. So very, very difficult position to be in.
Gotcha. And I know you see it on TV, like, well, don't worry, we'll appeal. But I mean, that's TV. Yeah. Appeals almost never work. I mean, they do sometimes, but it's rare.
It's very rare. Yeah. And think about why. You're in prison while this is going on. You have lost your job. You have lost your property. You are now depressed because your relationships are destroyed. Perhaps you've lost your children and your spouse.
Unless you can write a check for 6 figures.
In which case you were okay to begin with.
Yeah, and you're out until pending the appeal, right? Then you're out pending the appeal. Correct. Yes. So this goes back to our system being hammering everyone who's not wealthy.
Yeah. So if you are in a position where there's a hung jury and you're like 1 or 2 in the minority, I would definitely keep my mouth shut about jury nullification, stick to my vote, and just hope for the best for that person. I will say, I don't generally like the idea of negotiating. Oh, if I'll change to guilty on this, if you change to not guilty on that.
Mm.
But I was actually I'm now kind of undecided on that in some cases because of a juror who actually saved a man from serious prison by negotiating and went guilty on a very minor charge, but got
And
other
what's
people to
sad
agree
is
not guilty
your
on
point
major
is
charges.
they do that. Your point
Mhm.
is people don't realize. People think, unless you've been in a jury, then you know. But if you haven't been in a jury, they think, well, we look
Mhm.
at the data and evidence and blah blah blah. No, people are like, dude, I'm
Right.
hungry. Can you just say guilty
That
so I can get to
oh,
lunch? That's
oh,
literally how it works
and
sometimes.
FYI, there have been cases that have been appealed because the judge refused. This is so much like the famous jury nullification of William Penn, where the jurors were imprisoned until they supposedly with the idea that they would stay there until they changed their vote to guilty. Fortunately, they didn't. But there are modern cases that are appealed because the judge is like, it's 10:30 at night, you're not getting dinner until you handle this. And it's
Yes,
like, what?
yes,
How do you
absolutely. Yes,
what? That's not
yes.
a thing. That can't be a thing. And yet it is.
Yet it is 100%. Yes. So Shelley
Mhm.
says pro bono attorneys don't care to put a lot of effort. I think it depends upon the organization.
Yeah.
Really, it depends upon the organization. There are some organizations that this is what they do,
Mhm.
and they raise money.
Yeah.
They do it pro bono for you, but they
Mhm.
raise money based upon their success. So they have to do well so
Mhm.
they can raise money as a nonprofit. So those judges are going to go. Lawyers are going to go out of their way because that's how they make
Yeah.
their bones.
I have to also stand up for the pro bono attorneys who have helped FIJA because we have over the years had many people who are handing out our brochures outside of courthouses who were arrested and falsely charged with various things. And just the work that has been done on our behalf, we would not have a certain Supreme Court ruling in Colorado without pro bono attorneys.
There
We
we go.
had pro bono attorneys go to bat for us in Florida. Um,
Yep.
there are a number of pro bono attorneys who have like written friend of the court briefs for us in other
Sure.
people's cases. So
Yeah.
I
I agree.
I don't want them to at all feel slighted.
Yes, 100%.
But yeah.
So Dave says we are always told by conservatives that only guilty people ask for a lawyer. I would argue not just conservatives.
Yeah. That one to me, I don't see a party line split on that.
Yeah.
I think
not
it
conservative.
tends to be people who haven't had a lot of contact with the legal
Yes.
system.
I think that's a class issue.
Yeah. And you think, well, I haven't done anything wrong. I saw Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I saw 12 Angry
Right.
Men. It's all good. And I get that
Yes.
because I have been that naive as well. I don't, but we do need to absolutely adjust that attitude.
Yes.
And I have a great modern day reason why we should. If
Okay.
you, I'm constantly like bringing up like historic cases and here's how it was in the founding days, and I always am frustrated because I'm like, well, that doesn't necessarily speak to someone who's thinking, well, that's not how it is today. But look over at Hong Kong. What has happened in the last 2 years?
Oh, right. Yeah.
They had a common law jury trial system, somewhat different than ours, but quite robust still. And that is gone 2
Yep.
years ago, and it's gone. And what do they have
Yep.
instead? They have this security law that thousands upon thousands of people protested against. And now those people are not getting jury trials. So
Absolutely.
do they
Yeah.
not? Do they? I mean,
Well, there's something else though, right? I look at the wealthy, right? Look at the wealthy. Have you ever seen a wealthy person go, no lawyer for me? Right? You've never seen that.
I'm
Wealthy
innocent.
people-
I'll save a few bucks.
That's correct. You've never seen one go, yeah, I don't want to pay. They lawyer up before they even think.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And what most people don't know, and I bring this up often,
And cops,
You know, if-
when cops go to court
Oh.
in criminal trials, are they without a lawyer?
never.
No.
They have a
The
team for
union is paying for
That's
their
correct.
lawyer.
They got a union
Yeah.
team lawyer.
It's
Yes.
a benefit.
Yes, it is. They don't have one, they got a bunch.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes. But-
I was
but lot of
actually a
people don't
little
realize-
surprised
Sorry, go ahead.
I was actually a little surprised that Derek Chauvin didn't have a better lawyer. I didn't think that went very well for him.
Yeah, but they wanted him to go away.
The union?
Yeah, they wanted him to go away.
There's something else going on that I'm not familiar with. Okay.
What I believe is, if for them they were like, this guy's let's get rid of him as fast as possible, get him in, get him out, so we could like let's patch up this. That's what they were thinking. Let's
you got your win now. Now that issue's over, kind of thing.
Correct. They wanted him to go away. Like, just go away. If you notice, when the verdict came down, he was just like, whatevs. Like, he knew he was going away. There was no doubt.
Yeah,
he knew. So I don't get me wrong. I feel bad. Even Derek Chauvin deserved, a trial like everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm glad he went away, but I'm just saying he deserved a trial like anybody else, right? No matter what, you deserve due process like anybody else does. But what I was saying here is, people who are wealthy, unless there's some media presence or some reason for that to happen, they don't even get arrested. They literally get asked to surrender. Right? They
make an appointment, come on down.
Yes. And people think I'm joking when I say that. No, they call them up and go, hey, they call their lawyer and say, hey, I've got this warrant out, for Mr. Vecchio. And when can he show up? Right? Can he come by tomorrow around 10? He's got a couple meetings. Can we do 12? 12 is fine. Great. And they come in.
Oh my gosh.
Tells us, because he's wealthy, he takes a day off. He tells his friends that he's going whatever, business trip, whatever he tells them. He then gets totally processed within a day. Out back at home, out on bail. No one even knows he was arrested. No one even knows he was prosecuted unless you look for him.
Yeah.
But if you're not, they kick your door in, shoot your dog, and then beat you up and bring you in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is. Is a whole different thing.
So Phil asked an interesting question. What would happen if, after due process seized assets, they go to the public defender's office?
Oh.
Instead of going to the police office, they go to the public defender's office. Would it change?
I feel like I'd have to think about that one long and hard, because do you want to incentivize public defenders?
No.
That way? That doesn't seem like a grant. I get everyone needs more money, and certainly public defenders, are not an exception there. But yeah, I think we need to get rid of civil asset forfeiture completely.
Me too, 100%.
If there is not a criminal conviction, then you can't take someone's property. That is punishment, and you're not punishing the property, you're punishing the person. We all damn well know it. It's a complete made-up story by government so that they can avoid actually upholding the Constitution and fulfilling their responsibilities. It just has to go.
Agreed completely.
So.
Robert says, I was on a few juries. Wow, Robert's bigger than me. They treat jurors like garbage. 100% true. Yes, they do. Everybody else in the court can have water on their desk, but the jury must request it. Can't hold anything. Notes can't be taken. Sad. This is an issue, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say some of that is changing. Although I have yet to find one person who has gotten free coffee at jury duty. Let me know when that happens. I would love to know who gets free coffee, because everyone else in that courthouse is getting free coffee.
That's exactly right. Yes.
But I will say one state to keep an eye on is Arizona. I'm originally from there, so I tend to know a little bit more about them than other places. But they seem to be on the cutting edge of a number of jury issues. One is, I believe you can take notes in Arizona and several other states. You also, in many states, and I think Arizona might have been the first or maybe among the first, if jurors during the trial have a question, they can write them down on a piece of paper that gets handed to the judge. The judge screens them to make sure you're not asking something that's illegal or whatever their other, screening it is. I'm not saying I would get rid of all the ones that judges would get rid of, but at least some of them do get through.
Something at least.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes if the defense attorney isn't making a point that the jurors need to hear, they can sometimes get that information by having that question asked through there. And then something else that Arizona did this year, they're the only state in the union to do this, and the federal courts don't do this. Arizona, as of January 1st, 2022, got rid of peremptory challenges. There are two ways to, when you're in jury selection, there are two ways to say this person's not going to be on a jury. One is challenges for cause, and that means there's a legitimate reason, like, oh, this cop is the buddy of the person who's, the main witness for the prosecution or something like that.
Right.
That your wife can't be your juror, kind of thing.
Right.
So things like that. And that is actually broader than I portrayed, but you kind of get the general idea. Then what if you just don't like someone's, maybe I'm there and I'm sitting there because I can't keep my emotions to myself. And I'm like looking kind of ticked to be there. I've got closed body language. I'm rolling my eyes when you say stuff. The judge made a comment about your tie and I laughed like meanly. You do not want me on your jury because we're not having a really good rapport. But
right.
I haven't spilled any information that you can use to get rid of me for cause. So in most cases, each side gets a certain number of sort of freebies, and those are called peremptory challenges.
Yep.
Well, back in the day, if you look in Blackstone's treatises from England, peremptory challenges were only for the defense. The defense got one short of 3 full juries of people they could get rid of without a reason. Wow. The government could not get rid of anyone without a reason. If they got rid of someone and a reason was called for, they had to articulate it or that was it.
Got it.
And the explanation for this was that if you wanted to get rid of 3 full juries for no reason, you had amply demonstrated that you were refusing to be tried at all.
Got it.
And
okay.
Now you were in big
makes
trouble.
Sense.
But otherwise, the government bent over backwards to make it so that you could not say they were unfair in this jury selection to you.
Yeah, that was one of our challenges that you were talking about, right? We'd have to have a reason why, which is why we'd be looking. This sounds horrible. I'm just telling you the truth. We'd be looking in we'd be looking in the social media stuff, and then have them ask a question so that they would give themselves up.
Yeah. Yep.
Because we don't want to use one of our free spins.
Right.
Exactly. So we try to get them to give themselves up again. So we go, see, look, she just said the thing.
Exactly.
So we got to get rid of her. So you're totally correct.
So those are not, there are none in Arizona right now in any of the state courts. The legislature, so that was by the Arizona Supreme Court changed the rules of judicial procedure or whatever it was for that. And then the legislature was like, what? Wait, no, wait, you can't do that. So they were going to change that in their legislative session. Fortunately, I believe they weren't able to get it done. So that means we have at least a year of data that says the sky did not fall in Arizona.
Good. Yes.
So
absolutely.
It's not my preferred solution, but it's my second preferred solution.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
That's pretty good.
We'll take it. Absolutely. Missy says, don't forget to like the video, y'all. She's right, guys. Please do me a favor. Like, comment, and share. It does matter. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. The subscribe does matter. Everyone we get is going to count. Please do that if you can. But something else, you know that we have a sponsor for the show. It's the world's smallest political quiz. So please do me a favor. Click that link. Head over to theadvocates.org. Take that test and then share your results. It does matter. You might be more libertarian than you think. I'm sure you've taken it before.
And I will say this thing has been around for a while because I'm about to turn 50. And when I was in college, I was standing out there at downtown Saturday night getting people to take the quiz. As a libertarian student. So
100%.
Yeah.
And yes. And we actually, by the way, interesting thing here is we have data now on, how much people, where they're landing, progressive, conservative, all those things. The plurality of people forever have always been moderate, believe it or not. That's been the plurality. There's been no majority since they started, but the plurality has always been moderate. And the second one has been libertarian. So number one was moderate, and the second was libertarian, which is funny. But the next piece is, while we don't have a great cross-section necessarily of people who took the test, one that we notice is trends. And there's a trend towards authoritarianism. More people are becoming
that's alarming.
It's the smallest one.
Yeah.
But
the direction.
One is beginning.
Yeah.
The direction, yes, is towards growth in authoritarianism. So see that, guys? You can help. Take the test so we can have some data and send it to your friends.
Yeah.
It does matter.
And I definitely I just want to reemphasize, please keep looking at what's going on in Hong Kong as far as who's getting prosecuted and who's getting convicted and where do they go. And it's China now. I mean, it's just not Hong Kong anymore. It's China.
Absolutely.
China runs everything. And now people are going to be disappearing more. And we could have that very thing here.
100%.
I get that crime is not something we like, and that we have a natural tendency to, if someone's even accused, want to put them away. We want to stop the harm. And it seems like we even want to err on that side. But then we make our government an even bigger and less controlled criminal than it already is.
The Patriot Act was supposed to be used only against the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
That changed, didn't it?
Your social security number was never going to be an ID number.
That's correct. It wasn't. It is now.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. So also I want to bring up, guys, if you want to help me out directly, you can head over to Sharpway. Patreon.com/Sharpway. Throw me $5 or $10 a month if you can. Helps me out tremendously if you can do it, just so we can make sure this show keeps going on. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, help out if you can. It's awesome. But the free part to help out is just going through the World's Smallest Political Quiz. That's free. Do that. Take the 2 minutes, share it. Everybody's happy. So if you can do that, that would help tremendously. I do want to grab a couple more if I could. Comments, a bunch of comments are popping up. Charles is mad at us, I think. He says libertarians are not valuable advocates of freedom at all. They defend gangs, corporatism, and corporate welfare. Charles, I got to tell you, you're not doing your homework. I'm just saying, you're not doing your homework. That's literally not true. We do not support corporatism, no corporate welfare. We don't really mind gangs if they're not hurting people. But as long if they're hurting people, then we don't want them either. We want to put people in jail and hurt people who commit crime, meaning who create victims. And we are not about corporate welfare at all. In fact, we are, to be forward, the only group that is not about corporate welfare. Democrats, Republicans love corporate welfare. But yes, depends on which one they want. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Just as me and not as a representative of FIJA for a minute, because this has nothing to do with FIJA's issues.
Correct.
I just got so sick of people like coming down on single moms as welfare queens. So I looked up the baby formula industry. And if you want to see a welfare queen, look at Gerber and their competitors, because the way it is structured, they're the ones who are making bank off of welfare. I'm not saying there's nobody who takes their food stamps and goes out and buys Dungeness crab, but guess who is really the ones making bank? It's the companies. It's not the individuals.
100%. So thank you, Charles, for watching. I appreciate it, but that's just completely, utterly, absolutely opposite. So None Your Beeswax says, can I demand a libertarian on my jury? Well, I like that idea. We should be able to do that, shouldn't we?
You can do almost anything. If you're asking if it's going to go well, that's a different story.
There we go. Yes. You can ask, I guess, but it's not going to work. Absolutely. Yes. Floyd goes on and says, there are two legal systems in the USA, one for the haves and the other for the have-nots. There is only as much justice as you can afford. I have actually had lawyers tell me that. Can you afford justice? I wish it wasn't true, but I think it is true. It's sad. But I think the only defense against this is exactly what FIJA is doing, right? The more we know about the system, the more jurors know about the system, the fairer the system will be. Kirsten, am I wrong?
Yeah, and I think, to me, part of the reason why I want people to please try and get on juries is, why are all these people taking plea bargains? Because they know they can't count on the jury. But if we can start showing, more and more examples where they can count on a jury, then they're going to feel less pressure to take plea bargains, and they are going to be more confident in going into jury trials. It's a big battle. Right now, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe in New York, I looked up this number, according to the New York Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, I believe it's like upwards of 94% of felony charges are resolved by a guilty plea, and 99% of misdemeanor charges in New York, it's plea bargains. And I have a lot of people in jury nullification circles who will come down hard on people who take plea bargains, but I say it's our fault that we aren't making, the jury to the point where they feel like they could take a gamble.
And what people
Nation
don't
of
understand is, right, this is the thing that libertarians get, but most people don't. We're happy to make new laws. And I'm like, no, right? You don't have to make new laws. All the laws that we need are already there.
yes.
When you
Okay.
make new laws, all you do is add more charges, so you increase. And what I'm
And
reading
this
here,
is
I gotta tell you, this one drives you crazy. This is a made-up one. There's literally a charge which you hear all the time: wire fraud. Wire fraud is not a crime. I mean, it is, but it's not a crime. Is there such thing as knife murder? No, it's murder.
It's fraud. It's
Fraud.
murder. Yeah.
We don't have to have a wire. That's
It's
a
a
made-up
separate
charge.
thing. Yeah.
Yes. Or to your point earlier, you had the drug, but you also had a bag.
The bag. It's a Ziploc bag. If
That's a
I ever
charge.
came up to you and arrested you for a Ziploc bag, everyone would think I was insane.
Yes.
I would be the one who would be going to jail for falsely kidnapping you. But when it
Yes.
comes to the government and a drug touched it, not like our dollar bills that are all tainted,
Right.
they're all, if anyone has money, you have drug paraphernalia. This
Yes,
is
you do.
ridiculous.
I'm sorry. I
But-
just had to say that. Keep
Yeah,
going.
I
Please,
know.
go ahead.
Don't get me started.
Yes.
So you did get me started on another thing, though, because
Go ahead.
one of my pet peeves right now is everyone who learns about jury nullification, their first reaction is, we'll make a law that the government has to tell people about jury nullification.
Yes.
And then it'll be great. You know what? I would love you to put me out of business this way. If you could, I would have much easier time fundraising for cute little animals and small children.
Absolutely.
No one wants to give money to jury trials, I assure you.
Yes.
But the reason we exist is because, as previously mentioned, economics. What legislature is going to turn around and say, I worked so hard to make this illegal, now I want to tell everyone they don't have to enforce it? That is
Right.
not a thing. What judge is going to want to accurately inform people about jury nullification? There
They
has
don't.
been one state in the United States, to my knowledge, that has in my lifetime passed a law even sort of coming close to this. It's New Hampshire. And a lot of people falsely think that New Hampshire now judges have to tell you about jury nullification. That is so not true. And it's made my job a lot harder because people are misinformed about it. The law that was passed did not say anything that the judge had to do. All it said was that the defense was allowed to argue jury nullification.
Oh, got
And
it. Okay.
since then, the New Hampshire Supreme Court unanimously reinterpreted that law, saying, oh, that's not actually what it meant after all. This actually just restated the law as it was already in existence, which why would you do that?
Why would you do that? Yes.
That is not
Yes.
a thing in New Hampshire anymore.
Right.
If it ever was, I only saw 2 cases in which this came into play. The first one, I think, was before the law even actually went into effect. But I think that the judge was like, it's only a couple months away. Let's just do this. And that one turned out well. The second one turned out very badly because the judge followed the law, let the defense argue for jury nullification. The prosecutor then came back in their closing argument and said, yes, you can nullify, but you shouldn't, and here's why. And then the judge, in his instructions to the jury, basically told them that jury nullification wasn't a legit thing, which the law didn't say he could or couldn't do. It was not part of that. So they were like,
wow.
What? And they convicted. So very unfortunate case there. But
okay, so
when people are busy trying to pass a law, then they think, oh, we don't have to educate each other.
That's yes.
And the other thing is they think, oh, I can't do it until the law is passed. False. Every court in the United States, you can vote not guilty for any reason you see fit.
There we go.
Already.
So Dottie says, you also see on TV, we know he's innocent, but you don't have an alternative guilty party. So yes, right. Oh, thank you for bringing this up. And I bring this up all the time, right? When I consult with defense attorneys, I don't just want to show a jury and cast doubt. I also want to create a narrative that it could have been somebody else, or maybe it wasn't a crime, or maybe someone made a mistake. You've got to craft a narrative that shows, because juries do look and go, well, there's a crime, so somebody did it.
Yeah, what else explains it?
Yes, so you have to give them either that it really wasn't a crime, or it could have been someone else, or it was some kind of mistake. And legally, you don't have to do that.
Mhm.
But for a jury, Dottie's right. You
Yeah.
got to have some kind of, well, then who did it then? Or why did it happen? Or why the cops wouldn't bring him here for nothing.
Mhm.
That's how juries think. They think
Yeah.
they wouldn't be doing this for nothing. So you have to show, no, there was an error somehow. Somebody made a mistake. And that's very hard, but I think she's right. And you see that too, don't you?
Yeah. I actually had never watched NCIS before this year. And though it's not a courtroom show, I have been watching it. And the number of times that they're like, I want a lawyer. And then instantly Gibbs comes back and is like, well, maybe you're a terrorist. We'll send you to Gitmo. You think you're getting a lawyer there? I'm like, what?
Yes.
Wait, what?
Yes.
It's just, it drives me nuts how many, but yeah, television does influence how we think about things.
Tremendously.
The one thing I will say, I'm a little sad it's over, but in recent years, I think they had 5 seasons of essentially what you used to do. It was a drama called Bull, where they had a trial science corporation helping pick juries.
Yes.
And there were actually a couple of jury nullification episodes over the years in there. Though I never once, I think maybe once or possibly not at all, heard the words jury nullification. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, they probably would have had that canceled. They would.
Yeah.
Yes. They have a canceled episode. Yes.
But
Jean says a bad story. She says, my husband was scared into a plea bargain that included him pleading to something he didn't do.
Yeah.
That is sadly
Common.
all too common.
Yeah.
Right? It's just all too common.
Yes. So common that actually a judge has written a book on it, which is in my suitcase because I just got back from Arizona and took it as my reading material. But basically, you know, the stakes are so high, and if they aren't when you begin the plea process, they just pile on more and more accusations until they're high enough that they crack you. And one thing that's going on in the state of Arizona right now, the ACLU has a lawsuit against Maricopa County Attorney's Office, who, if you're not familiar, is kind of infamous in Arizona. It's the attorney's office that is in the same county as Joe Arpaio. So,
that guy's hardcore.
That's not the word I'd use, but I'm probably not allowed to use the words I'm thinking. So
you can. It's the internet. Say whatever you want.
He's a terrible person. That's all I'll say.
Yes. I was trying to be nice, but yes, you're right.
He's a human being. I could not live with myself if I was that kind of human being.
Correct.
But their attorney's office is not much better, because how they do plea bargains is, here's your plea bargain. You have to accept it pretty much immediately without any question, or we're taking it away.
Yes.
You don't have time to really consult or think about it or anything. And when we do, we're going to they specifically state on the paperwork, we're going to be much, much harder on you if we take it away, which that has nothing to do with justice. That is just about coercing you and scaring you enough to say whatever to make it.
And I've always thought that we should have a law, and this is a crazy law, but I think we should have it, which is whatever plea bargain you are given, whatever that is, if you refuse it, no matter what, they may not ask for anything more than that. That whatever the prosecutor says and gives you the plea bargain, that no matter what happens in the future, you just have to keep that no matter what.
Yeah.
And that sounds crazy, I know, but the point is, to your point, if I believe that whatever I think you did deserves this punishment and I accept that as punishment, then that's the punishment. If you go higher, you are literally punishing someone for executing their rights, for using their rights.
And it's a constitutionally guaranteed right. It should be free.
Correct. And it isn't. But here's the next part. Enhancements. And it's a bit off topic, but this is enhancements in sentencing. Why do they exist? And when most people don't know what that is, basically things like this. I'm not joking. A judge will say, well, if the person, I'm not joking here, if you actually take the stand in your own defense and you're still convicted, the judge can say, well, that means you lied.
And showed no remorse.
Correct. So defending yourself as is your right, you are literally, you'll throw 5 more years onto your sentence because and that's completely fair and legal and the norm. And I want to vomit when I think about it.
And I've got one worse that I'm going to tell people, and they're going to be like, she is totally making this up. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Please Google it, because there is a federal act in play that is trying to get passed to fix this. But there is a phenomenon called acquitted conduct sentencing, which means that, let's say, we, the jury, found you not guilty of 19 charges, but we found you guilty of one charge. Well, the judge now is supposed to sentence you on that one charge, but he can, quote unquote, enhance the sentence based on the 19 charges you were acquitted of if he disagreed with the jury.
Yep.
That is literally a thing. It is considered legal. I'm pretty sure that Gorsuch and Sotomayor and probably Clarence Thomas would all be against it. I say that because, well, actually, I don't know about Sotomayor. She's a wild card on this one, which is kind of surprising.
I don't know. They're all still priests of the same religion.
Yeah.
So
a case
really
of
sure.
Yeah, a case of this sort was actually submitted, and to get accepted by the Supreme Court, you need 4 judges to say yes, we'll hear it. It only got 3. It was Clarence Thomas, Scalia, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that is a political spread that you don't often see in agreement. And they all said, this is the exact kind of case on this issue we've been looking for. I can't believe we didn't take it. And Sotomayor was on the court at the time. So I harbor a little bit of resentment for her, because this could have been handled years ago.
There we go. Yes.
I do hope that she has come around. But I'm pretty sure Clarence Thomas would still be good on this. I bet Gorsuch would be. He has been good on a lot of jury issues, not perfect. Still got him on my raised eyebrow list.
Yes.
But
absolutely.
You know.
Yes, I mean, this is an issue that we see constantly. And people don't know. People still believe that, well, that everything is for murder, right? The vast majority of plea bargains are not murder. Like the vast majority are not murder, right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, most murders aren't even solved. So the vast majority aren't that. And then the enhancements pop up. The system punishes you for using your rights. Like your crime is heresy. Mm-hmm. That's actually your crime. Mm-hmm. And we don't, officially, we don't have a heresy crime. But enhancements is the heresy charge. Mm-hmm. How dare you defend yourself? How dare you make us do our job? How dare you take the rights you have for a jury trial? How dare you use them? And for all of that, we're going to punish you for that. That is our current system, and we're okay with it. Yeah, and it drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah, show me where plea bargains are even allowed in the Constitution.
Exactly.
I can't find it.
Yes, I can't find it either.
Criminal trial by jury is protected not only in the body of the Constitution, but also the 6th Amendment. People often forget that it's in Article 3. It is in the body of the Constitution before we even had a Bill of Rights. They reiterated it in Amendment 6. They added grand jury protection, which someone asked us to talk about, which we forgot to do.
You can still do it. It's fine.
We can. I have some examples on grand juries.
Yeah. Yes.
And you have the 9th and 10th Amendment, which protect jury rights as they existed at the time that the country started. So as jury rights are basically the most protected rights in the Constitution. And look where we are. It's appalling.
Yes. Well, because they get in the way. Yeah. So yes.
Yeah.
So by the way, Lyra says, love this conversation. Thank you. Well, there we go. I like that. I like that. Very good. Yes. So I think we do want to talk about grand juries if we can, right?
People, if you look at grand juries right now, you're like, what were the founders thinking? This is horrible.
Yes.
But you have to, if you look back in the history, you'll see they worked almost exactly the opposite of how they work now. The government, the prosecutor wasn't allowed into the system unless invited by the grand jury. Now the prosecutor is the one that dictates terms to the grand jury. Mm-hmm. Secrecy.
Yes. It's nuts.
Doors.
So you are breaking, you're breaking up a little bit there.
Oh no. Am I back?
Yes. And now you're back. Good. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. It's Montana internet. So I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
I am hardwired in though. No Wi-Fi. I went and I've got all my tabs closed as much as possible.
I do want to grab a little bit real fast if I could. A couple of, I always bring up people who disagree and such so that people know I'm not hiding. Charles is back and he's mad at us again, I think.
Okay.
Charles says it's literally true. You do not know what libertarians do in reality. I want to be clear, Charles, if you don't mind, can you please tell me one libertarian who's in charge right now doing something? Oh, wait, you can't because we aren't. So everyone who you're saying is libertarian is not. We're not in charge. The people in charge are Democrats and Republicans who will sometimes call themselves libertarians, but they're not. When we have libertarians in charge, we have some at the local level. They never do what you say. And when I say never, I mean never. Not one time. Yeah. If you think I'm making it up, we had one libertarian in Congress at one point. His name was Justin Amash. If you want to check out his record, you can check it. He literally posts it, and you can see what he voted on and why he voted against his party a lot and why he's no longer Republican. He was Republican at one point, changed to Libertarian. So demonstrably, you are incorrect. It is not the case. You are wrong. I thank you for watching. Please stay with me, but you are demonstrably false in every way.
And I'll also say my recollection is the previous comment said small L libertarians, which I am a small L libertarian.
Well, he put big L.
The first time too?
I don't remember.
I thought this time, yeah.
He put big L libertarian, right? So
yeah,
I'm talking actual libertarians. Big L libertarians.
Hey,
I'm a member of the party. I run as libertarian.
I'm an actual libertarian, just with a small L, bud.
There we go. Just saying. I'm a member of the party. I'm hardcore. I'm all in. I literally wear it on my shirt. Like I wear it on my shirt.
Yes. That it's in my heart. I don't even need to be in the party.
Oh wow, you're hardcore to me. I love that. You don't even need it. I love it. There we go. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. Danny says this was awesome. I appreciate it, Danny. Thank you so much. It's all good.
Thank you.
So I do kind of want to move, if we could, out a little bit. The grand jury, as you mentioned, what people don't realize is you can, if you want to, show witnesses and show up at your grand jury. You can, if you want to. The problem is, yes, the problem is even when you do, it's basically useless. What's the old saying? You could indict a ham sandwich if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Most people, I'm sorry, for those of you who don't know, to be clear, a grand jury, I'm going to be very basic. It's not 100% rule, but it's basic. Generally speaking, a grand jury decides if there's enough evidence to put you into an actual trial. That's not 100%, but it's about what it does. You can get it. So like if a grand jury were to go, wait a minute, why are you doing this? Then you wouldn't even go to trial, right? Generally speaking, though, you go to grand jury, you get indicted. It's very rare. So when people go, I can't believe it, he was indicted. Everybody's indicted. It doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
Literally means nothing. Well, this guy, they indicted him. Yeah. Everyone's indicted.
So, there was a few years ago, a newspaper, I think in North Carolina, basically did a study, and a grand jury, the amount of time they sat and the number of indictments, it was like one indictment every like 26 seconds or something like that. Yes, they're not considering these. The prosecutor is saying, here's why we think you should do it. And then they're literally, and when I say literally rubber stamping, I mean the literally, because we had actually interviewed one of our big supporters, became a grand jury foreman in Texas. And so that he didn't have to sign his name to all these things, they made a rubber stamp with his name. He's like, they were literally having us rubber stamp indictments.
Wow.
Yes. So that
literally rubber stamp, like not figuratively, literally rubber stamp.
The old school, literally, yeah. But
that is
basically how it works is, I don't know specifically for New York, but in most places, you, the accused, don't get a choice of whether you go in or not. You're not privy to it in most places. Some places, grand jury reform. Yeah, I think I think kind of recent, because I seem to recall vaguely that several states started
there's been new rules recently on grand juries and also on, which I love, discovery. There's been new discovery laws, which now, for those who don't know, what discovery means is that's when you get to see the evidence against you. And what used to happen in New York. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's not. It's not usually when there's a plea bargain. You have to take your plea bargain or forget it before you get to see their hand.
And that's not the case any longer in New York State. Yes. Well, what happened is they could lie to you. So they would literally say, and again, this is legal. They would go and say, hey, Juan, I got 6 witnesses that put you at the place, and your cousins already told me that you did it, and it's all a lie. And that's completely legal. That they can legally tell you, and we got your fingerprints on the weapon, and they have none of it. They can absolutely lie to you. and not showing you any evidence.
Oh my
And you get
gosh.
scared and you do a plea bargain, just like Jean said her husband did. And that's legal. They may lie to your face. It's totally fine, but you cannot
But
lie to them.
you're a criminal if you lie to the government.
That's correct.
You will be
You
prosecuted.
can't lie to them. Yes, but they can lie to you. Totally fine.
Yeah.
But, and it also
Yeah.
what happened is, say you're like, no, you don't have any of that. It wasn't me. What they would do is, say your trial, say it's 6 months before your trial, as an example. They would keep all the evidence, study it, come up with an entire plan against you for 5.5 months. Then give your team all their evidence, which you have to get 2 weeks before the trial. So they get 5.5 months to work against you. You get 2 weeks.
And
so
if
that
you
can
ask,
possibly do it.
and if you ask for a continuance, that doesn't count against your speedy trial deadline. It's now your fault because you
That's
asked for
correct.
the delay.
Exactly. Now, however, New York State's just been better recently on all those things. So we've
Yeah,
had some
yeah.
decent criminal justice reform in New York State
Yeah.
when it comes to that. So someone was asking earlier, Rafi was about criminal justice reform. I mean that. I mean
Yeah.
criminal justice reform that gives the defense a chance to defend themselves. And people always go, but then the criminals get away. This is something that most people don't understand. The vast majority of felons are convicted. It's not even close. The vast majority of felons are convicted. People aren't getting away. That's TV stuff.
Yeah.
The reverse is true. Innocent people are going to jail.
Yeah. One thing interesting about Georgia's grand jury system is there is literally a 2-tiered system where cops get special treatment. I don't believe they've fixed this yet, but cops, last I checked, were able to make a statement to the grand jury if they wanted and not be questioned by the grand jury about it. And there were a couple other things too. And well, why can't the rest of us have that? Why is it special treatment for cops?
Yes.
They're supposed to know the law far better than any of us. They have all kinds of training. They are in a position of authority. Why isn't the standard at least equal, if not higher, for them to be, like we should have an easier time, if not equal. It shouldn't be harder for us. The more power you have, the more you should be held responsible, not less. So
there we go. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, you're a Prio guy. We don't like him. Lyra says, I'm from Tucson. He's evil.
Oh, Arpaio. So the person from Tucson, I have a great grand jury example for you. You had a brilliant grand jury a couple of years ago that became known in the halls of the courts. I don't remember if it was Pima County, or I think it was Pima County, as the notorious 269th. It had a member of the Arizona Board of Regents, which is the governing body for the state universities. Someone from, I can't remember if it was the ACLU or another political advocacy organization, criminal justice reform organization. And yet another woman whose interest I don't remember, but they basically said all these drug charges that are being charged as felonies, we're no billing these. We're not gonna accept these. If they are charged as misdemeanors, we might consider them, but they just, in large part, between the three of them and a few other grand jurors, they were able to just not charge people for a large number of drug crimes because they said, we believe you're targeting people who are in the lower classes, who don't have the resources to defend themselves. We don't think these are appropriate level of charges. It's felonies for these things, not misdemeanors. And it's for tiny amounts of drugs. This is ridiculous.
Well, this goes back to the piece you brought up, which I wanted to bring up earlier, but I'm going to bring it up now because you brought it up, is whenever we're on trial, it isn't just the individuals on trial, but as far as a juror is concerned, the law is also on trial.
Yeah.
And if the law is wrong or bad or unconstitutional or unfair or whatever, the juror can go, this is a BS law, or it's being maybe the law isn't bad, but maybe the punishment's too much, or maybe it's being used wrong or something like that.
Yeah. And I would say you can do all that. Do it in your head though. Keep it quiet.
Yes. Juan actually says,
but
I made the first 2 cuts to serve as a juror in a civil case, and a lawyer asked if I thought the American justice system was best in the world. The minute I said no and mentioned jury nullification and loser pay, the lawyer immediately asked the judge to dismiss me. Yeah, Juan made the mistake.
Yeah,
yes.
I get that. How I might answer that in the future, having had ample time to think it over ahead of time that you didn't have, I might say, Well, I mean, I haven't looked at all the other countries, but we seem to be pretty fair. That's all things considered. I think we probably are one of the more fair systems. I'm not saying we're
Yes.
perfect, but I'm
No,
glad
I
we're not
agree.
China.
There we go. Yes, it's relative. It is
Yes,
relative.
exactly.
Yeah, it is 100%. Yes. Yeah,
I
we
don't
could
know if
definitely
we
do that.
are the best in the world. That's a good question. I mean, we could theoretically be pretty bad and still the best in the world. So
It's possible. Yes, it's totally possible.
yeah.
So Shelley says everyone is tough on crime until their crimes are found out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I want to say there's a fellow named Harvey Silverglate who wrote a book called 3 Felonies a Day that basically kind of the premise of is that without even knowing it, almost everyone is committing felonies on a daily basis.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, everyone thinks they're innocent, but we might not actually be. And can I just take a second to say how appalled I am that this nonsense about ignorance of the law being no excuse is still a thing that gets passed around.
Yes.
That is incredibly ridiculous to me. Of course it's an excuse.
Of course
While
it is.
While I was in Arizona, I tried to understand some Arizona law that was relevant to a situation of interest to me. And I'm pretty smart. I'm not saying I'm the world's smartest person, but I'm pretty smart. And I'm like, well, does it mean this? And then someone who was looking at me was like, well, maybe it means that. And then we had a third person. And between the 3 of us, we were like, we should speak to a lawyer because none of us 3 reasonably smart people know which way this goes.
Yes.
And
yes,
in a world
absolutely.
where will and shall mean 2 different things in the law, that's not a thing most people know.
Well, it's funny. What I would often say is I would say, you know what? And I would tease people, you know what we should do to fix our legal system? People say, what? We should write all of our laws in Russian. And they go, what? So yes, all laws we've written in Russian. They go, but then I can't read them. You can't read them now.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter. It might as well be in Russian.
We all
literally
that no one knows what we're doing.
Yes. So the funny part is you'd have to hire a Russian interpreter to read the law. Now you hire a lawyer. What's the difference?
Yep.
Neither way can you know. But I'll go one step further.
Yeah.
There are so many laws that I would argue, can anyone know all the laws?
It's not
now,
possible.
Not possible. In which case, if ignorance of the law is not an excuse, we are all guilty until we're targeted. Just once we're targeted, we're guilty.
Yep.
And I will go back again. We don't need any extra laws. I'm not joking when I say that. But Larry, what about someone who does a bad thing? Isn't there a law for assault already? Isn't there a law for fraud already?
Yeah.
Don't we already have the laws there already?
Yeah.
Right? It's not required. Yeah, but we got to charge him 6 times because it was a Thursday, so it's a special of Thursdays, and he's over 6 feet tall. So because he's over 6 feet tall, that's another law. So now we got 17 charges against the guy. And then what's he going to do? He's going to be afraid. He's going to plea bargain, even if he's innocent. And that's the worst part.
And
even
I
if
know,
he's innocent.
I know a lot of people have different thoughts on this. I tend to believe the family. But if you recall the case of Aaron Swartz, who basically copied a bunch of information, there were like academic papers from a database called JSTOR. He committed suicide after being hounded so mercilessly, even though he and MIT and JSTOR worked it out amongst themselves. The government was still coming after him and wanted him to serve prison time to the point where he wouldn't be able to vote anymore so that he could be made an example of. He never released these documents to the public, even though arguably the vast majority of them were taxpayer paid research. Never released it, just gave them back after he had downloaded them. No harm, no foul. The parties who actually had interest in the case were not concerned about having him put away. It was the government.
Yes,
and
absolutely. This goes back to your point. The government incentive is to incarcerate and to convict. This is exactly the point you brought up, and I think it's true. And also to make people an example, right? It's a show of power and force, which still hasn't worked. Ask the Chinese. It doesn't work. People still rebel. If you rebel against the Chinese government, which will literally run you over with a tank, you will still rebel. People will rebel. When people feel there's nothing to lose, and when they feel some hope, they will rebel. It's just how it works.
Yeah.
But I do want to go, if I could, if you don't mind for a second, to jump
Oh,
into
sure.
bail reform.
Okay.
Bail reform is a big deal here in New York
Mhm.
specifically, but throughout the country, but
Mhm.
heavily here in New York. And I feel like bail reform is a very important thing and should be done. I think it was done terribly in New York State.
Mhm.
The timing was bad. The way the judges reacted was terrible. And people think I'm wrong when I say this. I blame judges. And people think I'm wrong. And here's why I blame judges. You could have interpreted that law that if a person's a danger to others, that you could leave them in.
Mhm.
Not just that. What if you didn't interpret it that way? You still could have said, I'm not going to let someone out who is clearly a problem to somebody or themselves. I'm going to lock them up.
Right.
Judges didn't do that.
Mhm.
And they let out people who were clearly going to reoffend, right? People who had been, they let out people who, and somebody may not know this, who literally missed their last court date on purpose because they were committing a felony.
Mhm.
Like when they should have been in their court date,
Right.
they were committing a felony.
Right.
And they let those people out.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
blame the judges that they
Yeah.
should have stood their ground. And this was my error. I was wrong on this. And I'm often right, but this one I was not. I said judges wouldn't do it. They would lock the people up who were obviously bad. It would then go into the appellate courts and they'd have some rulings and they would fix this law.
Mhm.
That never happened. Am
Yeah.
I wrong on this one?
So I will say I don't know exactly the right answers on this. I'm still in the trying to understand it period. But I have expressed my skepticism to you about some things that have been said because there has actually been a crime bump in the last couple of years in a couple of categories in New York that is real. But where my skepticism has come in is the government automatically jumps to, oh, it was bail reform. That's
Correct.
the problem. And that
It wasn't.
connection, I don't think is valid because when you look at the recent rise in crime, that is in places that didn't have bail reform as well.
100%.
It's most likely related to the fact that we locked everyone down during the pandemic.
100%. There's no doubt it's
Yeah.
because of lockdowns.
They went a little
But
bit stir crazy. And
But there are two problems here that are important that wrap into this. Number one is most of the crime, particularly the violent crime, has been in poor Black and brown communities. So the problem is now you have people who are seen as elitists going, it isn't that bad. Well, because in their communities, it isn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the image is terrible. I've got these elitists going, it's not that bad. But then I got people going to bad neighbors going, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But what's bad? It's actually gang violence that has increased everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's number one. But number two, the media has done a very good job of highlighting the person who really is an embarrassment because of the judge. There have been stories of people who've been arrested 6, 7, 8 times, convicted 4 or 5 times. And again, I'm not making it up. There was a story about a person who was literally committing a felony when they should have been at their court date, and the judges let him out. So I think when you add that, there comes a point of, I feel bad, it looks bad, something has to be done, which is why my answer was focus on first-time offenders.
Yeah.
And that satisfies both sides.
Yeah. I'm kind of not satisfied with that because I look at this from I'm kind of looking at these things as how do they interact with trial by jury? And during the pandemic, I honestly thought there was a decent chance that trial by jury would be over because in every state, there were like months and months of stretches where people were left in literal indefinite detention, literally locked up with no prospect of when they might ever get a jury trial. In COVID-infested facilities, I might add, their jails are not notoriously known to be spiffy, clean, comfortable, healthy places to live. But now you put people with a serious communicable disease in these conditions, and that's not good. And these are people, if you're in pretrial detention, it's because you weren't convicted yet. It's pre-trial. You are innocent. So we're literally punishing people with the possible death sentence before they can ever get to a jury trial. And when you look at now, post-pandemic, sort of, depending on who you ask,
Right. Yes.
Um,
Correct.
obviously, some people have more incentive to keep us in a pandemic forever than others.
True.
But now we have courts backed up to the point where we're still not seeing in a lot of
Yes.
places progress on that. So, what happens when you are incarcerated without your freedom? You can't work. You can't pay your bills. You can't take care of your children. Your property is probably being confiscated if you're not paying
Yep.
your mortgage or your car payment.
Yep.
What do? Hold out for your jury trial? Or do you take a plea
No.
bargain?
You take a plea to get out of jail and get your life
Yes.
back and go. Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I get all the other stuff, and I'm not saying it's nothing, but I do wish people would kind of look at the big picture, because what happened during the pandemic was not, we're seeing the new normal is now becoming clear in legal circles, and there are a lot of things where they're like, oh, well, we can let these speedy trial violations go because it's not the government's fault there was a pandemic.
Right.
That's nobody's fault. We won't count that against the speedy trial deadline. There are just a lot of things that I'm like, we need to kind of look at the bigger picture here. And so when I look at, like, yes, a person's pain is real when they're assaulted, when they lose a loved one, that is all very
Sure.
real. But I don't think we're going to get less of it by giving government more power. I think we're going to get more of that,
I agree.
because their incentive is not to solve the problem. Their incentive
Right.
is to make it seem as big as possible. And every time I see an issue where there's a chance of reform in jury things, like there was in Hawaii, a recent Supreme Court case said, oh, all these people were not indicted properly. You had to use a grand jury. What happens? Oh, we're going to have to let out all these violent felons. In Virginia, they used to have even fewer jury trials than everyone else, because if you took a jury trial and lost, you had to be sentenced by your jury. You couldn't be sentenced by the judge. And the rules that the jury had to follow to sentence you were harsher than what the judge did. So it made no sense to take a jury trial, because if you lost, you were screwed twice. So
Right.
they fixed that recently. What's the big news? 500% increase in jury trials in Virginia, which is a big percentage, but they had almost none to begin with. So remember that.
Yes.
Oh no, we are going to have to let violent felons go free because we can't afford to blah, blah, blah. You know what? That's the same thing they say every single time. And I just want us to be a bit more skeptical of that and be very cautious about buying into that too easily.
Absolutely. 100%. The last piece I want to bring up here real fast is what I think is important when it comes to the bully pulpit of criminal justice reform. And this thing that I say often, and people get mad at me when I say it, but I don't care. I say it anyway. And that is, possession should not be a crime at all. And in my view, it's not a crime. I have the thing. I have the substance. How is it a crime? The question is, how did I get it? Did I rob somebody? That's a crime. Did I knock someone over the head to get it? That's a crime. Did I shoot somebody to get it? That's a crime. Did I break into someone's house? That's a crime. But that's not a possession crime. That's an action crime. Did I do something with it? And I feel, while no one could change all the possession crimes overnight, I feel like the appropriate executive could simply tell people, stop convicting people on possession. Just stop. Yeah. Imagine if a governor literally got up at his State of the Union address for his state address, and said, hi, people of Minnesota. Hi, people of Texas, New York, Montana. I want to bring up criminal justice reform. Every single law the legislation has brought up about possession, they're all bogus laws. You should ignore all of them. And every single time you're in court and that is there, you should just vote not guilty no matter what.
Right.
Imagine if a governor actually said that. Imagine what would happen across the entire country if one executive stood up and said, possession not a crime. Don't put someone in jail for possession. In fact, all it does is add more charges so that someone who doesn't know any better, usually someone of a lower socioeconomic class, is going to go to jail. A wealthy person is not going to buy it because his lawyer tells him it's BS, but the poor person doesn't know any better. Yeah,
I think it would be helpful. I certainly wouldn't feel comfortable to the degree I would want to, but it's certainly better than what we have now.
Yes, it's radical. I know it's radical, right? I do. And the point I'm saying is, I don't think it would all of a sudden get rid of them all. but I
Yeah.
feel like it would make everybody think about it.
It would make everyone think about it. It would probably give a lot of people that psychological feeling like someone gave me permission, which libertarians may not feel like is a big deal, but it can be to a lot of other people.
That's true.
So I think it could have a lot of psychologically helpful effects. It could potentially reduce prosecutors going after those charges to begin with, because I don't want to ever hear someone say jurors have to vote guilty because that's the law. To say that we're the only ones who don't have discretion in the process is nuts. Prosecutors have huge amounts of discretion.
Yes.
They don't charge every crime, and they know that. We all know that. So if they don't charge every crime, why do we have to, convict everything that we think?
Well, this goes back to the people who are anti-cop.
Mm-hmm.
We're blaming all the cops only. Don't get me wrong, they're bad cops. Don't get me wrong, of course there are. But the reality of it is, cops respond to prosecutors and DAs.
Mm-hmm.
If the DAs aren't going to prosecute these crimes, cops aren't going to arrest them, right? If the DA is saying, give me these crimes, the cops give them crimes. So a prosecutor and a DA affects the police force tremendously.
Yeah.
I would argue maybe even more than a police chief.
Yeah, it does. And more than a judge in a lot of cases, I would say.
Yes.
It's really the prosecutor seems to me to sort of be the hub of the whole matter.
Absolutely. Which is why I like the idea that California has with the idea of being able to recall a DA, right? Because as long as the DA is if you're being policed locally the way you want to be policed, I'm okay, right? Be policed how you want to be policed. And if a DA is doing something you don't like, remove them. If they're doing the right thing, keep them. I think it's a good idea. I rarely ever say we want to copy California, but in this case, I will say so.
I'm kind of waiting to see how it shakes out, because I think I know what we're talking about here. And I'm not sure they're going to like the newer person much more than they.
But I think that's a good thing.
They got rid of. Yeah.
Because what's happening in New York State is the governor can replace them.
With that.
I'm sorry, say again?
If they just recalled prosecutors constantly, I'd be cool with that.
Yeah, well, I think that's a kind of good idea, right? I think we want to learn that we can do this. It's a muscle we have to exercise.
Yeah.
So that we know that, wait a minute, why are all these people who are, poor and broken all going into jail?
Yeah.
Stop it. Right? It's terrible. The reason why I brought up possession is because in New York State, we have the strictest gun laws in the country. And most people think that the gun laws are stopping, crazy shooters from going out and hurting people. But in reality, they're all possession laws, and all they're doing is throwing out extra crimes against poor Black and brown kids in the city. So generally speaking, Democrats tend to be more for gun control. And Democrats also will tell you, hey, we care about poor Black and brown kids. However, their gun control laws are making more young brown and Black kids go to jail.
Yeah.
It's doing the opposite.
Yeah. And I have kind of one of those mixed emotion stories from 2011. There was actually a guy from Florida who drove up to New York to help his girlfriend, I think at the time, move. And he drove his car up. And in Florida, you carry a firearm a lot more casually, I would say, than in most places.
Yep.
He hadn't really thought about it. And it was in the car when he I think he turned right on red. And so there was a traffic stop. And that's how it came to light that he had a gun. And then they went to prosecute him for the gun. The good part is that it worked out well for him. But the bad part is because he had the means, like we were talking about before, to actually take it to a jury trial. He was at risk for 3.5 years in prison for having a gun in the car. There we go. He didn't do anything with it. He didn't try to hide it. He just was like, oh crap, I forgot to take it out in Florida. What do I do? And they were like, we know what to do.
We know. We got you covered. We know what to do. Yes.
Yeah, but his jury refused to convict him. I'm not sure if it was jury nullification because I was never able to track down the official charges, but it sounds like a likely case of jury nullification. So good for him, but who else is getting that kind of deal? Who else has that opportunity,
100%.
So
Darryl says there is too much money to be made on the backs of people. I think he has a point. This is
Yeah.
they're using us as they're using law enforcement as a profit center,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And that's the biggest issue. They're
Mhm.
using it as a profit center. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's see here. Jonathan says the irony, just got our mail and my partner got a jury questionnaire. She wants to rewatch this conversation for the insight. Thank you both. There we go. See?
Okay. FIJA.org/jury duty. There's a section, there's a link on that page to go to my in progress page on questionnaires. I also suggest you click on the one filling out there's the filling out a prospective juror questionnaire one. And then there's a questions to consider before jury selection. That was geared more toward things you'd be asked during jury selection, but they may ask some of those questions on the questionnaire. In general, for questionnaires, I've actually got some example questionnaires from real trials on there, because they will leave a massive amount of space for you to answer, which psychologically primes you to pour your heart out, because you're like, I want to fill up the space, but you don't need to. And if you don't, the less stuff you give them ahead of time, the less they can do as far as research and whatnot, and kind of figure out how they're going to, get rid of you ahead of time. It's better if they have to figure that out on the fly while you're in court. And,
there we go.
Again, I wouldn't lie. I'm not an attorney, so I don't give legal advice, but I wouldn't lie, because that would potentially be a serious legal issue. But you can answer things truthfully while still being neutral. You don't have to
absolutely
go straight up and really give them a piece of your mind right away.
Absolutely. So again, you see the links. I put the links in the description for those of you who are listening to check out FIJA. Go to FIJA.org or follow them on Twitter at FIJA National on Twitter. So please follow them, see what they're doing, checking them out. And if you want to support them, please do so. They could use every dime. It would be good. And you can also support us and both of us by liking and commenting and sharing, so that other people can see this. Again, look at it, get some good insight, let people know that it does matter. And maybe you got some wealthy guy or gal who maybe their son or daughter got in trouble and they got out and they were able to get out of it. And maybe they feel generous and want to write a nice big check to FIJA. Maybe they do. Let's hope that's true. That will be awesome. Yeah. But liking, comment, sharing is free. You can also support my donor, my sponsors, theadvocates.org over at the World's Smallest Political Quiz. Take the quiz, share it around. It helps me tremendously. If you want to support me directly, throw me $10 a month. Patreon.com/sharpway. All good to make sure things rock and roll. Kirsten, I want to say thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate it.
I had
you gave
fun.
us a lot. Yes, you gave us a lot. And I know you watch the show sometimes, so now you know what it feels to be on both sides.
And pretty soon I get to watch on Mondays, because I won't have a thing that conflicts with that after the
there
next
we go.
2 weeks. So
I love that. Absolutely amazing.
Happy about that.
Everyone else, I want to say thank you so much for watching tonight. I'll be on again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Until then, I will see you all very soon.